What up, Josh? I saw the last couple days you've hit the React sections, which I know can be a slog for a lot of people. That's where they might spend a lot of time trying to dissect what's happening, especially if it's someone like you or other students that really love to understand theory and underlying causes of what's happening in React. But I figured maybe something with me showing a video of me putting together a very simple React application from scratch really quickly will help illuminate some concepts you're not entirely sure on. So maybe we can just get some code going, and over time you'll be able to understand what's happening underneath the hood. So I'm using CRA to create a new directory in React app called helping-josh, and we're going to do this from scratch together, and hopefully I can do it fairly quickly. This video is kind of done on my free time just because I like seeing your code and I want to see you help progress. So I'm literally building this for fun for you tonight and recording these videos, which might be into 2 or 3 parts depending on how far I get, and I'm just chugging a beer while I do so. Nothing like coding and a Bud Light, am I right? I mean, it's cheap and easy to drink beer. I don't feel like doing a craft beer tonight, or anything harder than that for that matter. So I'm using Create React App, which I think I have the newest version on, or it might be updating because I know a new version came out recently. And this is just installing old, like React by itself, doesn't run it natively even in your Chrome browser. You have to have something like Babel, which I've shown you, that translates your React code into readable JavaScript by the browser. So what we're coding is getting bundled up and sent to the browser as basic JavaScript. So Yarn is an alternative to NPM, and it really just depends on user preference, and some things work better with Yarn than they do with NPM, but you can also use NPM to run these scripts. It doesn't matter. So we're going to cd into what it just built, which is helping Josh. I'm going to open up my code editor first before I forget to, like usual. So that's going to open that, and we get our basic project. And I would run an npm run start, but we're going to do some stuff here. This public and this source directories is not a requirement of React syntax. It's just the way that this particular Create React app project is built, and it expects these. And you can actually change that in your Webpack configurations, as we can't do unless we eject out of Create React app. So Create React app is not the be-all end-all. It's just the easiest and quickest way to get up and running with a React project out of the box. We can build our own from scratch, which I've done before, and it's a huge pain in the ass. So unless you really want to learn, which again, I can make a video showing you how if you're curious, but we're not going to bother with that for now. So just really quickly, I'm going to, instead of deleting the directories themselves, I'm going to leave them there and just delete everything inside. And we're going to write these suckers from scratch. Delete permanently. Get out of here. Okay, cool. So these are not required React syntax. It's just the way this current configuration is wired up. So Create React app expects an index HTML in a public directory. Not required in projects that you build from scratch, but for Create React app, it's necessary. And it's nothing more than your basic HTML document here. Help a brother out. And all we need in our body is a div. And that div has an ID of anything. It doesn't matter. Most people will call it root. Some people will call it app. I don't know. We can call it Bud Light. There we go. We have a div of ID Bud Light that's going to handle rendering our React components. And honestly, that is all we need here. That's it. Simple enough, right? Although, you know what? I'm thinking about it just for funsies. Let's maybe bring in Bootstrap. That way I can go ahead and start styling this thing out of the box a bit cleaner than this, whatever this thing might end up looking like. So give me 1 minute. Obviously, I don't remember this stuff off the top of my head. So let's bring in the Bootstrap CSS. And let's bring in, I can't copy and paste, but oh my goodness, copied and paste way too much out of that project. There. Just bringing in the Bootstrap stuff. That's all I'm doing. Right? Nothing major. So that's done. and nothing you haven't seen before, hopefully. And so our next point of entry will be an index.js in source, which is expected in this architecture. So we have an index.js. And this is where the magic happens and what you already pasted in Discord that I saw. So you need two things for React to run here. You need React imported from React, like so. That allows us the use of JSX in this file now. And then we also need import React DOM from, guess what, React DOM. This provides us a render function that interacts with the virtual DOM for us. So React DOM will render whatever necessary component needs to be rendered into the DOM for us. So like the thing about React is it does a virtual DOM that loads into the real DOM, right? And so that's where props and state come into play. If you change state and it recognizes that the virtual DOM is different than the real DOM, it'll re-render into the real DOM based on a state change, which is the fun part about React. And I'm not sure where you are in this section, so this might be a little bit over you, but roll with it and code with me and have some fun. And ultimately, you're going to want to import an app.jsx like you've probably seen, but I think you know you can. A component is nothing more than a JavaScript function that returns JSX. And at its simplest, we can just do this. We have a const app, and again, I think you can have lowercase here, but your components need to be uppercase for React to actually read it. But we're going to test it together here. We're going to do this as an arrow function like this. Every function should have some kind of return, and it's going to return some amount of JSX, which we're going to just call hello world. Boop. Cool. So that's our JSX function, our JavaScript function that returns JSX, aka a React component. And so then to get it into the DOM, we have to use our React DOM library, which has a render method on it that will render our application, or in this case, our app, like so. I know you're probably already screaming at my syntax, but I'm just showing how to do it incorrectly so we can build it up together. And then you use some DOM, document.getElement by ID, and my element ID I think was Bud Light. There we go. There's our most simple possible React application. It will throw a error, which we will be diagnosing together here in just a moment. So we're going to run npm start, aka npm run start, which uses Babel to convert our React code into like ES5 old school JavaScript, and it will bundle it and then send it to the browser, which will start a local development server on localhost 3000, which will then throw an error here in just a second with any luck. All right, come on. There it goes. The tag app is unrecognized in this browser. If you meant to render a React component, start its name with an uppercase letter. Good to know. So that is a requirement of React components, that their names need to be identified specifically with an uppercase character. And you can see it automatically turns green as it recognizes what it is. Okay, now it says app is not defined. Well, I'm sorry. You have an ESLinter built into create React app, and so it tells me errors in here along with my console. App is not defined. So that means I've converted it to an uppercase letter here where I call my app component, but I haven't upgraded it, or not upgraded it, I haven't changed it here. So let's do that. And it's going to re-render, and there we go. Up and running. That is the most simple possible React application we can build together. But typically this is not the syntax or format you see, right? Typically this is imported in from somewhere else. This is like you want to keep your entry point, your index.js, as simple as possible. So what we're going to do is cut this out real quick. We're going to clean some space up here. Inside of our source directory, I'm going to create a directory called components. And inside of components, I'm going to put in app.jsx. I'm going to paste that here. And again, because we're returning JSX, it will not be able to understand that unless we bring in the React. Oh my goodness, I can't type at all. Oh my god, okay. From React, there we go. We're bringing React from React, and now it understands this is a component that has JSX inside of it. This will now not be accessible in index.js if we import it because we haven't exported it yet. So the easiest way to handle exports is just to export by default app. So this is saying, hey, by default, out of this file, we're going to export just this function, and that's it. You can export multiple functions from one file, but typically in React, you want to keep it to one component per file to make it simple to understand and follow the chain of parent to child components. So I haven't done a whole lot different from here. We still have the same import. I cut the app out and put it here, and all I did is add this export default. Now, because I added this, I can now do this. I can import app from this directory, components, app. Boom. And now if I hover back here, it's all hooked up and working, just as expected. Now, something that's cool about React is if you have a component like app here that has no inner text or no inner children or no inner HTML, we can actually make this into a self-closing tag like this. And it is no different than writing app. There is no different than writing the app we had just a second ago. This is the exact same syntax. It just makes it a self-closing tag because it has nothing in the middle. So again, if we go back, it has hello world still rendered to the screen with no error, right? Very cool. I saw in your Discord message you were already using props. And so because we're not using a class component, we don't have to specify the this context. Every time you make a functional component, which is what this is, it doesn't have to be a class component. It is built with props being passed down, so we have to insert that into our arguments here. And then now we have access to props, which is an object, right? And right now it's not being passed any props, but let's pass in something like, I don't know, we'll have a props called name, and it's going to be a string that says Josh. Surprise, surprise. And so down here, it's being passed down a prop, which we defined as name. And so props should have an object that has .name on it now. And so now, if we go back to our application, there we go, we get hello Josh. And as you can imagine, we can change this to something else like Luke, and it should automatically render as needed. Hello Luke. Nothing magical about that, right? Pretty simple overall. And again, this can be, it doesn't have to be a string. It can be an integer if you wanted to. Don't have to call this name. We can call this pizza. Oops. And if we change it pizza up here, we have to specify it down here. So if we go back to our app, you see it doesn't show anything, right? It just says hello blank because it tries to create name, but name has no value because we didn't pass a prop called name. So if we change this to pizza now, we get hello Luke. Very cool. Simple. A lot of the times, your index.js, you'll just have app here. Until you learn some more higher order component stuff, I wouldn't stress about doing any kind of props here. That was just an example to show what a prop is and how it works and how you can call it anything you want. And again, we didn't have to pass in a string with a name in it. We could have passed in a number. We could have passed in an entire object. We could have passed it in a whole array. We could pass in booleans. We can pass in whole functions if you wanted to. But that's higher level stuff that I'll let you play with, or maybe I'll make another video for you if you're curious. And a lot of the times, your entry-level app.jsx here, it really won't do a whole lot. A lot of the times, all it really does is structure the rest of your application. What do I mean by that? So let's say if I go into Bootstrap now, no, wrong website. Sorry, I'm working on multiple monitors here just to make sure life is difficult. We are going to go to components. We're going to pull in a nav bar. Let's just get the simplest possible one. This one right here. I don't want to overcomplicate things here, which I have a tendency of doing. Cool. So rather than code this directly into app, why not app is going to be like our overall layout of what we want our app to look like. And it's going to be built of other components. So the idea here is, okay, I'm going to make another component. We're going to call it navbar.jsx. Now, these file names don't have to be capital letters. But I like doing so to indicate to other programmers that because they have capital letters, they're probably React components and not like service files that do something for us. So that's like a visual indicator to future coders saying, hey, this is a React-based component because of the capital letter syntax we're using. So again, we're going to start by making a functional component like so. We're going to import React from React. It's going to be a function called navbar. At the moment, we're going to take no props in. It's going to return some amount of JSX. We don't know what or care what yet. We're going to export it for use anywhere else. And this is my favorite way to start wiring up any React component. I start with the functional component, I put in a header, and my header typically says what the component name is. So now in here, I'm going to delete this h1. I'm going to import navbar from what we just created, this directory /navbar. And it's going to now return a navbar component. Nope. I can't type navbar. And again, because my navbar doesn't take anything, this totally works, or you can always just turn it into a self-closing tag to save yourself some text space, which if it stops auto-completing, there we go, I can do. So now let's come back to our application. Nope, not here. Here. Cool. So my H1 is showing up, no probs, nothing to it. So let's come back here and let's fill in and paste our navbar. I'm going to auto format. We have a nav class navbar, navbar bgli, blah, 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 navbar. Okay, now let's come back to our app. Ooh, here we go. So it did render. Like it's showing the bootstrap navbar, the gray bar up here with the title of navbar, but nothing else. And it says invalid DOM property class. Did you mean class name? Interesting. So in React, we can't pass just a class attribute into these elements because they're not actually HTML elements yet. We're writing JSX, which looks like HTML, but it's not. It's getting rendered down into like it's used as React component, like it uses a React.create class. So we're essentially creating nodes. We're creating an element, and then we're creating a text node, and we're putting them together. So under the hood, this is all just DOM, which you know that workflow. I've seen your labs. You understand what's happening. But we're writing HTML, so we don't have to write a line for a nav, a line for a span, add classes to them, and then add some and create a text node and put them all together. We can just write what looks like HTML. That's what it does. And so it doesn't know how to parse the class attribute because eventually you have to add classes to a created node, like what's it called? Created DOM element. And so because we have to use classes, on the JSX side we have class name, which eventually gets parsed down into class. So we have to do class name in order to not throw errors or mess with the underlying DOM. So now that error goes away and my navbar is still showing up. Beautiful. Easy. No problem, right? Okay, so under a navbar, you typically have a body of some stuff, right? That's a pretty fair assumption, I'd say. Let's say it's going to ultimately be a grouping of some cards or something like that, right? Let's do that. So our navbar here is done. I mean, it's not going to have any interactivity yet, so I don't need to worry about state. I'm going to leave it a functional component only until I need to upgrade it. Cool. So let's make another component. Let's just start going crazy with this. And let's call this card.jsx. And as you can already imagine, I'm going to do my same test as I normally do. Import React from React. We're going to have a constant called card that at the moment doesn't take any props. It's going to return some amount of JSX. If I can type again, it's kind of late at night and I had a long day. Card. Card. Exports default card. Good. Good testing ground. Come back into app. We're going to import this sucker. Card. No. Don't you dare autocomplete. If you're going to autocomplete, do it correctly. My goodness. Okay, there. And then we have card. And again, because it takes no props, or it doesn't have any inner text to it, boom. Dunskies. Ah, that's interesting. I already have a red underline. Why? JSX expressions must have one parent element. AKA, adjacent JSX elements must be wrapped in an enclosing tag. Did you want a JSX fragment? Interesting. So, you cannot have sibling elements return in your JavaScript or JSX function. They have to be children of one wrapping element. And in React, you can do something as simple, I believe, as this. You can wrap them in a div. Let's just do that. That'll probably make more sense than the shadow divs. Nope. Like this. And now we have our navbar and our card wrapped in a div, which means now this returns one parent div that has two children of navbar and card. The error is gone, and now it is properly drawing up as we expect. So that's just a rule of React you have to keep in mind. And out of curiosity, I believe in React you can do this. If you don't want to have a bunch of extra dangling divs, you can actually just have these two shadow wrappers. And on the underlying DOM, let's take a look at it here. Yeah, it doesn't produce an extra div. Whereas earlier, if I go back to my old code and come back, you see that my div has a div that has class navbar and the h1 card as my two components, right? This guy and this guy are my two components, and it has this div. As you can imagine, sometimes if you have a lot of these wrapping divs, it gets very confusing as to where everything is. So if it doesn't require a div for any special class or spacing issues, you can use these blank tags right here to say, hey, just return these two elements together underneath a blank div. And as you can see, it does not get rendered into this div here. There's no wrapping div around it. It's just my two React components next to each other. And it follows the rules of React. Cool. Okay, then. Well, what if we want a bunch of cards? Well, actually, before I get that far, let me paste in. We're going to now fill out our card, like so. Auto format. I'm going to do a little trick here. So again, all these classes, after we copy and paste from Bootstrap, have to go to class name. So what I like to do is highlight this high level, this topmost class here. And on Windows, it's Control D, and on OS X, I believe it's Command D. So you can do highlight the first one, and you can see it highlights the rest of these. Watch this, Control D. And then now I have a cursor at all of them, and I will do this, class name. Boom. That's a quick and dirty way to get it up and running as fast as possible. So check this out. Uh-oh, what happened? The style prop expects a mapping from style properties to values, not a string. Oh, yeah. So here's another fun part about React we're going to learn together. In HTML, you can do inline styling like this, but that does not translate into DOM from JSX. So what you have to do is this now becomes in JavaScript. So like right now, we're coding in React JSX. If you wanted to do regular JavaScript, we have to break out of JSX. So like you remember if you were using single quotes around a string and you had an apostrophe somewhere in your string, you had to escape with that backslash. This is a similar idea. We're going to escape out of our JSX like this. Two curly brackets means we now have access to JavaScript variables, JavaScript logic, arrays with arrays map. We can do if-else statements. We can do ternaries. We can do JavaScript variables that have a value, whatever else we want. So the style in JavaScript is an object. And that object has a key of width. And the default card had a width of 18 rems, like this. That is how you style inline a React component. Style becomes I have to break out of JSX into JavaScript, and the style JavaScript is an object that has our CSS property as the key. And again, this is kind of like in DOM or jQuery, where you don't write background dash color, you write background capital C color camel cased. So you convert same way, it converts into the camel cased properties. So the property width accepts a string value of 18 rems. Now that error should be gone. Beautiful. We have our card here. Now check this out. We have coded one card here, right? And if we want to use it multiple times, we now can. We don't have to code a whole bunch more cards like you would have to copy and paste in HTML or jQuery. Look at that. We got access to as many dang cards as we want. We've coded one. And if I change the text in one, they all change, right? If we change card title to Josh will learn React and come back to our code, blah, dunskies. Josh will learn React on every single one. That's the power of React components. We code one component we can use across our entire web app, and we can magically make it update as we choose. And this is also where the power of props comes in. So let's for a subtitle, let's just assume we're going to get past some kind of prop. So we have to add it here, props. And in our JSX, we have to break out to use JavaScript. So there we go. And we're going to say props.subtitle. Again, I just chose subtitle. I'm assuming we're going to call it subtitle. We can call it whatever you want. But let's get rid of all these cards. Go back to one card. And this is just like we did before. We have a prop of a key called subtitle, and it's going to be a string. And again, you don't have to have these curly braces to pass down a string, but you'll have to for like a JavaScript variable or something. But we'll just do this for now. I don't know. I'm not good at coming up with this stuff on the fly. Smash Bros is awesome because I love playing that game. And so now our card should now print that out, right? And so now this is the thing. Like, what if we had like 10 cards, but they all had different subtitles? I'm not going to copy and paste anything. But we're going to say, like, I don't know, melee is the best one. Oh, yeah, look at that. We've coded one card, and it can now dynamically display two different things. Very interesting. That allows us to do some cool stuff. We've coded a dummy component called a card that has a title, it has a content, it has a subtitle, it might have some stuff on it. And we can dynamically have each card look differently even though we coded one component, all because we pass in a different prop. And that's where the power of React comes in. You've coded one component that you can use across your web app that can be dynamically displaying stuff based on what you pass it. And that's where the fun in React is. Pretty simple and pretty fun, in my opinion. Let's see. We can obviously paste this like 10 more times and have 10 different subtitles to show off some stuff. But I don't feel like doing that, as it'll take forever. But I don't like having, so let me see. Let me get rid of this and take it back to card subtitle. It's a hard-coded H6. And we're going to get rid of that card for now. We're going to go back to this card. Confirmed. It's back to good and done. So now, again, I mean this, no, not that. Let's give it a little bit of bootstrap style. So instead of having a bunch of those, we can have a div that wrap these suckers like this. And this div, guess what? It's going to have a class name. We're going to call it container fluid. That will have another div inside of it. It's going to be a class name of row. And I think you can already see where this is going. Right? Now we have this overarching row here. And let's say each card is now going to also be a column, medium, and let's say each one takes up a 4 or something like that. Yeah, let's see what that does. Oh, look at that. 4, 8, 12. So that's our 12 column grid right there. So as you can imagine, now we have a dynamically scaling app as well. Right? Right on. That's the beauty of React, and this is what like a lot of my initial projects in React typically look like. I mean, you see this right here? Look at this blog that we have been building and testing with together in my Catalyst cohort. I deployed it to Heroku, and it's called testing-boiler.herokuapp.com, and you can come play with this if you want. But check out this super simple app I just built here. All right, check out what I've been building in a larger scale React application. So this particular one we're about to go to is a React front end with an Express server API we have coded connected to a MySQL database, a full stack application which you also will be coding by the end of this curriculum. And look how similar this guy already looks. This is a free tier dyno, so it means it takes a minute for it to actually spool up and load the website. If I pay for it, I can make it spool up instantly. Now, why does this look so familiar? Well, it's a navbar that has some styled cards under it that have some information that have some functionality. Covalence is life. A new code, the code walker strikes back in return of the code walker. And I've been showing other students this application today. They found out my Matt Landers' login. This is our test login, meaning this is a user in my database called test@test.com, password blah blah. If you come log in and add a post, it'll pop up on this blog site. So I expect to be trolled heavily as I start showing students what this is. But look at that, like the thing we built here in just a few minutes is the exact same thing as this higher level blog we're trying to build together. Now, obviously, for your future projects, they'll have more complexity than this, but I'm just showing you that what we did here is exactly what you're going to be doing later down the line. So understanding how to build and think in components that have reusability is important. So like as you can see, they have a title. They take an image that right now is hard coded as this image, but we can change images dynamically based on what we're given. They all have an author that has my name. They have a date when they were created. They all have some content that's stored in a database. The same thing as this guy. You'll learn how to make these more dynamic when you learn how to target APIs, which I would love to do a section for you if you get that, or if when you get that far, because right now I think it'd be too much for this particular demo. So hopefully seeing me code this out right now has given you an idea on the basics of React. And I'll be happy to make a follow-up video showing you how state works and how we can use state to start altering stuff in here within each component if we wanted to, individually and dynamically. So let me know if this helped you, and let me know if you would like a follow-up video, as I'll be more than happy to show you one and make one for you. Thanks, and happy hacking.